Hello, I'm Austin and I've been asked to set the scene for an environmental exercise you'll be doing over the next hour. I spent 20 years as an environmentalist, initially in the Royal Air Force as a wing commander responsible for RAF environmental protection policy, and then later as a director in a large global engineering consultancy, advising businesses and on projects that had the potential to have a major environmental impact. And what's striking to me now is that over that time, the momentum for environmental change has accelerated, and it's really been driven largely by the passion and enthusiasm of the younger generations, just like you. My environmental career was born from serendipity. My earlier career in the Royal Air Force was as an air traffic controller, which is perhaps not an obvious foundation for my later career. And it was at a time when the environment wasn't taken too seriously in the MOD. But the UK was part of the European Union, and we had to comply with a raft of new and emerging EU legislation, all focused on the environment. Now, the MOD did not want to be seen to be not complying. So we set up a new role as Head of Environmental Protection Policy. And guess what? They told me that was my new job. So no choice, just get on with it. But looking back, you sort of got to ask yourself the question, how was an air traffic controller perhaps the best person for the job? So it was with some trepidation that I took up my new appointment, and also an MSc in environmental management. Now, to get changes done in those days was a real challenge, especially if it required money. It was seen as the tree huggers territory, not the business of the armed forces. And understandably, most military colleagues perceive their role as defending our nation, which might involve us in conflicts elsewhere in the world. What's the environment got to do with us? So to get the attention of senior military hierarchy, you had to show them how the effort focused on environmental protection would help them achieve the primary military objective. You had to prove that the environmental goal was relevant to the military objective. So when I talk about the environment, it's worth taking some time to think about what that means. What is the environment? Now, it's a very broad question, and the answer makes you realise how complicated the subject is. So let's briefly explore this. We could think of the environment as the air we breathe, the land that we live on, and the water we drink, and making sure that we humans don't pollute it. But most of the forms of transport that we have emissions that pollute the air. Many of our industrial activities have polluted land and water, and this pollution has formed the basis for nearly all environmental legislation. Perhaps the most concerning polluting activities at the moment is the release of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, and the waste, plastic waste in particular, that find their way into the world's oceans, threatening ecosystems. But protecting our environment is much more than this. So as well as human activity polluting, we also consume the Earth's resources. So fossil fuels such as coal, oil and natural gas are being consumed at such a rate that they'll not be available for future generations. And these are known as non-renewable resources. And that's because the planet took millions of years to make these fuels, and they are not being replenished at the same rate at which we're using them. So this is why we're looking at renewable forms of energy such as wind and solar, tidal, geothermal, and things like fuel crops, which are much more sustainable. But the environment is more than this. So our planet is a complex, balanced ecosystem of habitats, plants and animal species, and human activity and overpopulation constantly threatens this balance. So this gives you a flavour of how broad the subject is. So when we say we want to protect the environment, what do we really mean? Now, you've all heard of Marks and Spencer's. It's a high street chain, it's got a great reputation, and they want to protect the environment. As you've seen, it's a broad topic. So what should Marks and Spencer's focus on, and why? Now, they chose climate change, waste, and resources such as energy and water. Now, it's really important to choose something that you can influence. and measure, because you can't manage what you don't measure. Now, whilst these issues are great for the environment, there are other good reasons for Marks and Spencer's to do them. If you reduce waste and use less energy and water, you'll save money. And these savings are to the business's bottom line. So if the business has a profit margin of 10% and you can save £100,000 in waste and energy over the period of a year, that's the equivalent to an additional £1 million of turnover. And it takes a business a lot of effort to increase their turnover by £1 million. So you can see how these savings can be very attractive to any business. M&S has also been at the forefront of businesses doing their bit for the environment, and as a result their reputation is really good. And that can lead to additional turnover, because we like to buy from businesses that are doing their bit for the environment. So the wider business benefits are really important when you're trying to push environmental change, and it makes it easier for businesses to buy into the environmental agenda. In the MOD, we too focused on energy savings in our buildings and equipment, and that saved us money too. And it also reduced our use of non-renewable resources and lowered emissions responsible for climate change. So all good things for the environment. We learned quickly that the true cost of fueling conflicts provided a compelling argument to use fuel wisely and to find savings. So just to highlight that, to deliver a litre of fuel to a conflict area might be 30 or more times the cost of that fuel, because you've got to take it across the world. So it might have to travel in ships across land to get to the conflict area. It's a very, very complicated supply chain. We also recognise that in previous conflicts that the vulnerability of our supply lines had resulted in many casualties. So if you could use resources more efficiently, you could also save lives. And this now became a very powerful argument to support environmental initiatives. And we call this the fully burdened cost of fuel. Now, to deliver energy savings, we focused on behaviours, processes and equipment. So things like simply encouraging people to turn off lights or to turn heating down, or perhaps fly or drive your vehicles more efficiently. We then also considered and did put systems in place in buildings that ensured that we automatically saved energy. And we also produced fuel plans for aircraft so that when they were planning a route to fly from one location to another location, there was a known fuel load that would enable them to do that would take into account weather and diversion variabilities. And that meant that that aircraft wasn't actually carrying unnecessary mass, and that meant it was more fuel efficient. As well as focusing on behaviours and systems, we also changed equipment to make it more fuel efficient, bringing in things like low energy lighting and also renewable energy options where possible. We also focused on other issues like waste, hazardous materials, reducing noise, and many, many other issues which they continue to do to this day. Now, every organisation and person has the opportunity to make a contribution to a better environment. For example, at home, you all know, we separate our waste. At school, it's no different. So I wonder whether you can think of ways in which you might be able to achieve some environmental benefits at your school. What might you consider? Perhaps resource use, commuting, what you buy in school to deliver your education, what you eat, what you throw away, what you wear. Also think about what some of the other benefits might be to the school. For example, doing some of these environmental initiatives may save you money. They may ensure that you don't break the law. They may deliver health benefits to staff and pupils. It may improve your reputation, which makes your school more attractive. Or it may indeed improve the whole educational experience of pupils and staff. Now, it's often the wider arguments that persuade senior decision makers that it's worth doing. Also consider how that you will know that you're being successful, and this is really important because you cannot manage what you don't measure. And finally, use the SMART acronym: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time-bound when deciding what to focus on. I hope that's a help to you. Good luck and enjoy the exercise.